Call to order the East Lyme Board of Finance special meeting for budget reviews, Wednesday, March 28th, 2018. First item on the agenda is the pledge of allegiance. Second item, pledge of allegiance. So please all rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. No, I sent her a text. He hasn't responded.
Really been hard to pick up your voices.
Yes, especially me because I don't lean in. I gotta lean in. All right. Next item on the agenda is delegations. Under delegations, anyone that would like to discuss, would like to make a statement about anything that's currently on the agenda, please come up to the podium, state your name and your address. Delegations? Delegations? No delegations. Okay, thank you. Next item under new business, budget reviews. First budget to be reviewed is Planning Department and Commission number 117.
Okay, obviously Gary Gaishel's here, the department head, and most of these budgets, especially tonight, are not going to need a lot of explanation, and to keep things short, I kind of leave it up to the department heads to kind of just go over any major increases or decreases and what the results are, and then open it up for your questions.
Okay.
It'll be smoother that way, Mr. Chair.
And as far as announcing who the department heads are, we've had a comment in the past that we know who's speaking, but
Yep.
not necessarily
So
everybody
Gary
else.
Gaishel is,
we can.
It's typical in our town. Many of our department heads wear multiple hats. Gary wears obviously the planning hat, the inland wetlands hat, conservation of natural resources, he's the department head over there, and GIS coordinator.
Yep, and there's a housing, I forget the title, but I never have to do anything.
The title
so.
that you have, okay. So Gary Gaishel is here and obviously works hand in hand with Mr. Mulholland and Mr. Smith downstairs in the building department.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Gaishel, Planning Director for the record. It's a pretty straightforward budget. We kept it as zero possible, increases as possible. The largest increases are salary, and you'll see there's a 40% increase in longevity. Apparently I've been here that long. Otherwise, there's some good reductions. We cut the transportation allowance in half. We continue to maintain our GIS equipment. Those are our largest expenses next to my salary. If there's any specific questions, I'll be happy to go over what we've accomplished in 2017, 16, 17, if that's of interest. And if people have questions about what the Planning Commission does and what I do for the town, I'll be happy to share.
Okay. Is there any questions on the board for what the Planning Commission does?
Just one? You're undertaking a POCD this year, is that true?
We're going to start this year. I've recently secured roughly $50,000 through CIRCA, Connecticut Institute for Resiliency and Climate Adaptation. We're using that, and we're going forward with a climate adaptation and sustainability study. In addition, we are pending a grant application to the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments for a Route 161 corridor study from the high school all the way to Route 161. We've requested $225,000 for that study. It's a pretty large endeavor, but I think it's going to be needed. I did attend a workshop that the COG hosted with the Southeastern Connecticut Housing Alliance, and they're projecting in terms of residential housing an uptick. Roughly 7,200 new households will be formed.
In the county.
In the county.
Right.
So that's going to be spread out amongst 22 towns. So I think it's just something that we need to be aware of, that it's going to happen as we move forward in the future. So we've started to see some movement in land use. Just roughly, I think it was August, we received a 25-lot subdivision known as Twin Valley. That went before the Wetland Agency, and unfortunately they denied it. In that they had some concerns. So that's currently in litigation, but it is being appealed, and the developer has just submitted his application to the planning agency yesterday. So we are seeing there's 25 lots there. And we have existing housing stock, which is pretty large. There's a lot for sale. There's still a number of lots up in the orchards that are available. The issue we have is affordability, and that's we're going to have households of younger generations struggling to locate here based on our housing costs. So it's just something to keep in mind. In the spirit of a POCD, the Planning Commission has appointed a walkability subcommittee and a climate adaptation subcommittee, which they have not yet met, but they will start meeting in preparation for the POCD. I'll be working closely with the first selectman to establish probably a steering committee to move things forward. But starting early, being that it has to be done by 2020, the last POCD literally took a year to write, so I anticipate it's going to take another year to accomplish that.
POCD stands for?
The Plan of Conservation and Development. It
Okay.
is the guidance document for the town. It is required by statute to be updated every 10 years. Failure to update that usually never resulted in any consequence, negative consequence anyway. But the statutes have changed, and now it can jeopardize our grant funding if it is not updated. And in regards to grants, for those of you who don't know me, I was employed in 2008, and since that time, we've written a number of grants. I've been tracking, and roughly I have either directly and indirectly contributed to roughly $2.3 million of grant funding. So we continue to seek grants to offset our costs and in order to get business conducted here in town. So that's something that the planning department does. We also review zoning commission referrals, board of selectmen referrals for all public improvements, or majority of them anyway, as well as subdivisions, which they come in sporadically. I also run our geographic information system program. Mainly it's just a software program in-house. We provide mapping services for any department that so needs them. Right now we're working on the MS4 program, which is the municipal stormwater program that the state requires us to map all of the stormwater outfalls. So we're starting that project this week. And that's using GIS to capture all that data. Basically it's the geographic location on the earth, as well as the dimensions of pipe sizes and outlets and a number of different data that we can track, particularly for infrastructure maintenance costs, as well as environmental water quality.
Thank you. Any other questions on what the Planning Commission does?
I just have a few quick questions.
Okay.
Gary, that was the first time that I heard you mention that you were directly responsible for bringing in over $2 million in grants. So that is good information to have. I thank you for that.
And I would just note that I do share that with the Department of Public Works in conjunction, because we work together closely to achieve that.
It's good to try to map some revenue with the expense side of the budget. So this $7,250 that is on your budget for the revenue, what does that represent?
The application fees?
On our revenues, yeah, it should be application fees primarily. It also includes GIS mapping and copies. So that should be roughly, the planning department will generate approximately $7,000 a year in revenue.
Okay, so when people come for copies and maps, they
Copies,
pay
maps.
you a fee. Okay,
Correct.
so that's pretty much what that.
The larger fee is really subdivision applications. That's where
Okay.
the fees add up.
And just remind me one more time, please, what percentage of your salary represents the planning director salary? Is that 60%? So,
percent-
so line 211, the planning director
Right.
salary, that represents
that's 100%, as far as my understanding, right?
Well, you get your income from a couple different budgets, right?
And
Yes.
Wetlands has a line item there too.
Yeah, I would say it's about 60%.
60?
60. It's split. Literally on the books, it comes down to, I work 4 days a week as the town planner, 1 day a week as the inland wetland agent.
Okay, thank you.
That's it?
Yeah.
Dan? Questions? No questions. John?
No.
Lisa?
So, does this revenue show up on our revenue sheet?
That's where I saw
It does.
Yeah. And it's the same amount.
01, 05, 500, 504.
Okay, so it's on our sheet. Cool. Just, it's peanuts for money, but help me understand the basis for the longevity item. Do you have to be here certain years and it bumps up?
This October, roughly 24th, it'll be 9 years for me here.
So is this, again, just help me understand it. This is not a union position, right?
Correct.
Okay, so so what's the basis for it?
It's part of their contract, part of their agreement with the town. After so many years, they get longevity pay.
Yeah, no, I just want to understand
Yeah.
it. So,
What the
When you-
calculations are, I don't have those.
no, I don't really care about
Yeah,
that piece of
okay.
it. When we hire somebody for a department head position, they're not union positions. So what do you mean we sign a contract? I mean, we talked about it a lot, but I'm just kind of scratching my chin a little bit going, who has contracts and who doesn't?
Well, we have a hiring agreement. I mean, they're leaving one place and going to another. They need to know how many vacation days we're gonna have, and how many sick days, and what the vacation policies are, and what the rate of pay is, and what's the potential rate of pay going forward. Things like longevity would be built into that hiring agreement. We use a pretty standardized, we've had this agreement in place long before Mrs. Hogan was first selectman, et cetera, et cetera. In discussions with this group, as you know, I'm working toward updating that hiring agreement with the unaffiliated. And we're very close to the end of the discussion period and getting into the ratification period. So more will be revealed before the end of the budget season, hopefully, of where we're taking this agreement.
So are you looking at this longevity item, Mark? Are you considering trying to?
I don't know that longevity was on the table now. We've been talking about steps. We've
Yeah,
been
no,
talking
I'm just
about this
saying if we're-
automatic step with GWI and all that. That was critical to your group, and that was the feedback I was getting.
Mm-hmm.
But and also in just today's world, getting a double hit doesn't work out. So we're trying to remove that from many of the collective bargaining agreements we have in town. But we are in the process of rewriting and working with the group to find the best solution.
So the step item in here, 2.5% step, that's kind of the same deal, part of the contract. It's
It has been.
currently inflexible,
It
currently.
has been, yeah.
Uh-huh. But we're going to be taking a look at that. Okay. Just a little housekeeping item, not a big deal, but why do we have, under recording secretary in the notes, it says first selectman reduced from 2,000 to 1,700. Don't we normally see what the original budget is and then what you've changed? And I don't see the 2,000 line item, and I'm just wondering, is this an anomaly? Do I have a
That's how it's been.
Yeah, so what happens is when the department heads come in, anything that the first selectman is going to change is noted in the narrative. But on the first page, it shows what the change that the first selectman.
It's already incorporated when we look at the
Yes,
numbers?
that's correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Again, in the housekeeping part of it, in the narrative, it talks about fiscal year 2008, 2009. I think you want 2018, 19. But I think this talk about salary, I know it's a thing.
No, I don't think that's true.
That fiscal year, just for clarification, 2008, 2009, that is when my position as the town planner was reduced from
Right.
5 days to 4.
That's correct.
Oh, okay, so that is, okay. Okay, but I think this conversation about salary is important because a couple of weeks ago, we transferred money and everybody felt like their hands were tied. There was nothing we could do other than accept the fact that we had to transfer the money. And I think this budget season now is the time that we have the opportunity to do it, so we don't feel as if we're all the different expletives that people were using a couple of weeks ago. So, beyond that, I don't have any other questions. So,
On to the next budget?
one more time, is there any other questions for 117? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item is Inland Wetlands Committee, 132.
So, I'll let you get to there. Inland wetlands also is obviously Gary's domain, if you will. Inland wetlands, we also have a new chair of inland wetlands, Gary Upton. Are you here? Just wave here. Yeah, here I am. Mr. Upton, new to the East Lyme scene, but already doing a great job on inland wetlands. It can be a very, very sleepy commission, and it can be a very active commission depending on the amount of applications coming in and what's going on in town. They've had a very busy season, had multiple public hearings in the course of this current year, which has drained some of the clerical items. We leave that consultant on there in case we do need to go outside, and having a placeholder here is a good thing. Sometimes we don't want to rely on the applicant bringing in his consultant. We want to go out to get an independent source. We don't always use it. In this case, we hadn't used it for a year or two, but it's always been there, and I don't think we should remove that. Other than that, it's a very, very tiny budget, as you see, and it's driven by clerical increases, which is really the only thing other than Gary's salary.
I would note on that consultant line item, that is a pass-through account. We collect that as a complex application fee, so it is offset by the developer.
Okay. Any questions from the board for what the Inland Wetlands or Agency does? Any specific questions about this budget?
I have one concerning the clerical recording secretary, and I see a bit of a jump in that
Yes.
line item.
So we actually were underfunded initially. We had exceeded the budget for their clerical time based on several. We had approximately, I think it was 5 or 7 public hearings with this 25-lot subdivision. As a result, the recording secretary was a part-time employee here with the town. And when they took minutes, what happens is after the first half hour, we're then now required to pay them overtime. So that busted the budget. So we had to start working with the first selectman to solve that problem. So now we went out to look for a recording secretary who did not work for the town. So we're managing it that way so that the hourly rate has come down. That said, based on the anticipated applications coming forward, particularly this one that we're dealing with that's currently in litigation, as that comes forward, I'm anticipating using that time and needing the $2,000. So, you can see in 2017, we spent $755. I think as we see this uptick in development, we may see more. So it's more of just being, I think, conservative in saying, hey, if we need, rather than transferring money at a later date, the money's there. But
So you're expecting more than the 12 meetings is what you're saying?
I'm anticipating, yes, several public hearings, or if we go over, depending on time.
Thank you.
I would say that the agency does its best to adjourn meetings within reason so that we're not having meetings that run on. Mr. Upton has done a fine job thus far, so we'll continue to do so.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Number 116, zoning.
Thank you. See you, Gary. Good luck with the meeting. Let me know. Send me a note when the meeting comes. Tomorrow. Great. Another taxpayer. Someday.
Thanks.
Right now, just a drain on us.
It's a bit different this year.
Are you making a presentation?
I am.
I'll try not to be.
Thank you.
So, next is zoning on your agenda. You'll see pretty much a
Thanks, Bill.
flat budget other than the salary. Don't forget the salary reflects last year, not this current year coming in. You remember the accounting that Anna can explain to you again, that 5-point-something% is a result of last year's stuff. We are working on a new agreement that as of July 1st, those kind of numbers won't exist anymore. Everything else is fairly flat. Bill Mulholland is our zoning enforcement officer. Again, multiple hats. He also is the aquifer protection agent in town, and is also taken on the blight, which is separate from zoning. It doesn't have a budget. And we work it out of the zoning office. We do use resources in the zoning office, like copier machines and the clerical that's down there, the staff, the team. But we did not create a position like many towns do. Many towns our size even have a part-time specific blight officer, and we've folded that in. So multi-hatted Bill Mulholland. Here today is Matt Walker, the longtime chairman of zoning.
Thank
Been there
you.
a while.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction.
Just-
Much appreciated.
Just one small housekeeping. There's a new, in the green file, there's a replacement for this. There's a typo on your page 1 of 1.
So this is,
For that, thank
Ready
you.
to go? Thank you. Again, Matt Walker, and I am the chairman of the East Lyme Zoning Commission. I want to thank everybody here for the opportunity to be here this evening and say a few words. I know you all have a very daunting task ahead of you. I don't envy you. It feels good actually to be behind the podium instead of seated at the table where I am on alternate Thursdays each month. I prepared a statement this evening that, with your permission, I'd like to submit for your consideration. It is essentially an overview of the relationship between the zoning commission and the zoning department, as well as some quantitative and both qualitative information, I would say, really, because it's no secret that zoning has played an integral role and an important hand in the smart growth of this town. So with that, I'd like to begin by reading the East Lyme Zoning Commission Annual Report dated July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2017. And I'm a fast reader. I'm a private Catholic school kid from way back, an era that Mr. Nickerson might be familiar with, where speed reading was in vogue back in the day. That's how they taught us to read. So with that, I'll begin. Charged by the Connecticut Legislature to develop and administer the community's comprehensive zoning plan, the East Lyme Zoning Commission adopts, administers, and enforces regulations which are designed to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. Though a separate entity, the zoning department is considered an integral part of the commission to which it reports. The zoning department is responsible for the administration, interpretation, and enforcement of the zoning regulations. The department acts as an advisory capacity to the commission and to the general public, providing technical knowledge on a variety of zoning topics to both parties. The zoning department is available on a daily basis to answer general and technical land use questions. In addition, the department also receives, reviews, and processes all commercial, industrial, multifamily, and single-family residential development applications. The zoning department, on behalf of the commission, also functions as the town's central development office. In this capacity, the zoning department operates as the primary contact point for parties interested in commercial, industrial, affordable, and multifamily development in the community, providing both information and guidance through the regulatory process. As in previous years, the department staff continues to work closely with developers to ensure a responsible approach to architectural and landscaping design. These efforts are evident in many of the new commercial buildings in our community. The new orthopedic offices and orthodontic dental offices are the newest commercial additions, along with the new Dollar General. In addition, the zoning office is responsible for the administration and enforcement of the town's flood hazard and coastal management regulations. While extremely busy, the staff continues its efforts to enhance service to the public. During this reporting period, the following activities have occurred. The following is essentially a listing of the type and total number of permits reviewed. Single-family dwellings, 38. Single-family additions/alterations, 207. Commercial light industrial additions, alterations, 34. Miscellaneous permits, which is comprised of pools, accessory buildings, signs, and other, 291. New commercial, 6. Mechanicals, 392. The total number of permits issued during this period was 497. A total estimated value was approximately $29,542,000 and change. In addition, the zoning office processed 175 plus zoning complaints during the year. The zoning commission held numerous regularly scheduled and special meetings over the course of the reporting period. The commission reviewed the following applications and concerns during monthly meetings. 18 special permits came before us, 2 applications for regulation amendments. There were 8 coastal area site plans, 6 site plans, and 4 regulation waivers. Further, the zoning commission, as mentioned by the first selectman, has been designated as the East Lyme's Aquifer Protection Agency. Aquifer Protection is a state-mandated program that is designed to protect major water resources or major public water supply wells and gravel aquifers to ensure a plentiful supply of public drinking water for present and future generations. This program's responsibilities are shared by the state DEEP, who oversees it, I should say, the municipalities and the water companies. Municipalities play the most critical role. We are responsible for appointing an aquifer protection agency, that's the zoning commission, inventorying land uses within the aquifer protection area, designated the aquifer protection area boundary, and adopting and implementing local land use restrictions. The agency regulates land use activities within the aquifer protection area by 3 things: registering existing regulated activities, issuing certificates for new regulated activities, and then overseeing those regulated facilities. To date, we monitor 28 businesses and regulate 11 of those. All have been inspected and registered. Others were not registered because they did not meet regulatory thresholds or are regulated by DEP directly. The Aquifer Protection Agency meets bi-monthly and is staffed by Mr. Mulholland, our zoning official, who is certified by the state DEP as an aquifer protection agent. He is responsible for overseeing the program and inspecting facilities. I also note that currently there is an unfunded board, or this is an unfunded board with no budget. That is the Aquifer Protection Agency. In addition, I also note, while not a function of the Zoning Commission or Aquifer Protection Agency, Mr. Mulholland also administers and enforces the town's fairly newly adopted blight prevention program. And since the enactment of this program, I will say there have been multiple cases requiring Mr. Mulholland's time and attention above and beyond his normal duties. As chairman of the commission, I express my appreciation to the Zoning Commission, fellow members on my Zoning Commission, for its faithful service, for their faithful service, I should say, to the town of East Lyme on this important and often controversial commission. I also extend my sincerest appreciation to our agent and zoning official, Mr. Mulholland, seated next to me. His zoning and planning expertise, his professionalism, his courtesy to those he serves, and his long service to the town of East Lyme is a huge asset to our beloved town. Through the work he does alongside of the commission members, he is dramatically improving the ambience, character, style, and pride of this town. In addition, I would like to express my appreciation to the administrative assistant, Jennifer Lindo Dashnaw, and administrative assistant Karen Zmutrick. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. And in addition to that, Brooke Stevens, who takes the minutes for our zoning commission meetings, for their dedication of support, the 3 of them. And with that, did you give them a copy of that? They have a copy? Okay. And then with that, our budget is attached, and Mr. Mulholland is here, and can ask either one of us. He's certainly ready to chime in and answer any questions you might have in regards to the budget itself.
Just one simple note, the handout budget that you gave us has the same typo as the one in the book. So the one that's in the green folder is correct. It's got the same 102 minus 25 is not 97.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you have something to add, or are you
I
gonna?
have nothing to add. We're busy. I think what you'll see in the future, I have an expectation that we may see another 120 units of housing in the Gateway development. It's their intent to apply. They are one of our biggest taxpayers. The commission will have to deal with that. I really anticipate late May, early June. We are also redoing the gas station up in Flynn's Four Corners. The shell will be knocking down the building. That'll be redone, remade. It'll be a convenience store as well. We've got a very nice looking building going in. I think you'll all like it. We're doing a new building at Gators Garage. It'll be 20,000 square feet. It has yet to go before the zoning commission. We're in design phase, and we've been going back and forth for 6 or 7 months on design. Our initial designs were questionable at best. We have made a lot of progress, and hopefully we'll get the right product, and it'll help that area of the community. I also have some interest in downtown. Had a couple restaurants contact me. We shall see. As you know, the Frosted Creek changed hands, so we've got some new things going on there, new menus, and there may be more. They're looking to buy more property in that area, so we'll see what happens with that. So we're relatively busy. If the 120 units come in after July 1st, we get 300 a unit, so we'll generate about $36,000 in additional revenue. As you know, our budget revenue stream is subject to market forces, but we're projecting about 25,000, so that would boost us up over that. So I'd anticipate probably 50, which typically we're at 25, and we've had a couple of good years, and again, I think we're probably going to be busy this year as well.
I think I joined the zoning board about 19 years ago, and if I could count the number of times that I heard you say we're very busy, it just seems to be your standard.
Hasn't stopped.
It just is, okay.
You're welcome to come down and help.
Not a problem. Any questions for the zoning board as far as scope that they're talking about tonight, before we get into the specifics and the numbers? Okay. We're gonna start with Jason. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, and I should know this, so your revenues, is it a percentage of the permits that come in?
There's a fee schedule that's adopted by the town Board of Selectmen, and that's given to us. We typically review that. We haven't really updated it in quite a while. I think it's actually, I haven't done a comparison with other towns recently, but I think it's rather reasonable at this particular point. But we charge so much for single-family, multifamily, for coastal area management, site plan reviews, stormwater reviews. If we do a commercial project, we'll get a fee of about $1,100 to $1,500. I think it's $300 for site plan, $300 for stormwater, and a special permit that's commercial is $500. Plus, we have to charge $60 for the state of Connecticut every time I approve something, and then we get to keep $2 for our cost and efforting, and we send that money to the state.
We do the work. And they
Yeah,
get the money.
they get the money. So that's all approved by the Board of Selectmen, and from time to time, we'll update that depending on where we think we're at and whether our fees are reasonable or unreasonable. You know, there's a fine line to when does it, you know, given our community, is it too costly to do business? We need the revenue, where's the fine line? So we try to walk that fine line.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan?
Just a question about the blight prevention program.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you with that, and have you had success in having some blighted
We
home?
have had a very
facilities
interesting
taken down?
time with it. I will say that it's a bit cumbersome because of the requirements of the state statute. So what I've done is sort of created a hybrid system of using the zoning regulations and blight. So when I send out a cover letter, we might cite them on a zoning violation.
Mm-hmm.
But we may also include in the letter, and be advised, we recently adopted a blight ordinance. You could be cited under this as well. And usually that two-prong approach has been successful with the worst cases. And there are some very interesting cases. You'd be surprised, we have some very blighted properties around the community.
Presumably, they're also tax delinquent, so.
They may
you
be.
know, they're-
We sometimes.
Yeah, so-
And of course, in some instances, the folks that have these properties, they are not economically very sound. So we run into some of those issues as well. And under the blight, they can ask for relief and non-enforcement. On the enforcement side, it's you need to do it. And yeah, so you've got to finesse your way through this. I've been in court a lot recently, more than we have in the past. So the community's changed. I think there's an expectation of folks moving into the town that they would would want the town to be cleaned up, and so we continually make that effort, and it's continuous. And I will state that Karen has been very helpful in my office, helping with the enforcement piece and writing all the letters, and she keeps track of that for me. We have some big 3-leaf books that we track it all. It's all tabbed, and we track the times and the dates, et cetera, so we know what's going on that side of what I do, which is a part of what I do.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Camille?
Bill, I certainly appreciate your efforts in bringing down some blighted properties in town. I know it's been hard work. It hasn't
you.
gone unnoticed. We
thank
do
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
My question revolves around the revenue side of
Mm-hmm.
your budget. Have we ever gotten to the point in any of these cases where we've actually assessed some of the fees that we talk about in the ordinance?
I have one case, I'd rather not discuss it in public. We are getting ready to go to hearing. I've assessed a $2,700 fine. It's appealable to the hearing officer. The hearing officer's been out of town and traveling extensively. So he's back, and we have, the family has some issues, and so we've tried to figure out a way to get it cleaned up without overburdening them. And one of the techniques that we might be able to use is to go to court and get a court order and go in and clean it up ourselves and then attach the property. So they're not out any monies up front, but should they go to sell the property, then the town would get its money back. There are a lot of different techniques, and we're kind of feeling our way through the blight. It's hard to go in and go after somebody who you know is destitute, but by the same token, the neighbors don't appreciate that parcel and they complain, and especially when they're keeping their properties pristine, and you have a property with upside down cars and toilets and boats and broken windows and garbage and chairs, etc. So we have been working our way through it. Mr. Nickerson has been very helpful on that side of the enforcement piece. And so we're making some progress. I think the one that stands out is the shack. You saw that come down. It took 6, 8, 10 months, I think, to finally get them to move, or maybe 15 months. But it's finally done, and I, for one, think it looks a lot better. I think we'd all agree it's about time. So, and the front office has been very good about backing up those enforcement efforts, because sometimes you do have to go to court. And even in court, it can get a little tricky. I thought my last court case, the judge ordered an armed guard to come in and stand in the courtroom while I was in the witness stand, because the individual chose to act as their own attorney and was within 3 or 4 inches of me, and the judge became uncomfortable. So there are some issues from time to time.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Anna, could you just reacquaint me with the explanation on the salary line?
So,
Difference between adopted and amended?
adopted is, because whenever we put the budget together, because the general wage increase has not been approved yet, it's always done with a lower salary. Then once the general wage increase is approved, during the fiscal year, we transfer the funds into the account. So
Okay.
that's why.
So this is a 5.06% increase.
Because that was both a general wage increase and a step.
Right. I remember now.
Which, and I mean, we are, as Mr. Nickerson indicated, we are working to resolve this issue on a prospective basis.
Thanks.
John?
I'm good.
Okay. The only comment I had was the zoning board, I think, is the only department that didn't have a narrative in the back. So that makes reviewing these ahead of time a little more difficult.
Did you see this?
It's a little narrow.
Was that-
It's not,
Right behind it.
Yeah, I did, but it just
Okay.
didn't seem to have the same. And so you answered up more than all the questions I had. I appreciate it. And I identified the typo, and I'm good. And thank you for all your hard work. And I think you said that this blight effort was going to be labor intensive. Oh, I did have one question about the legal. You said you've spent a lot of time in court.
Yes.
Do we have a separate, or do we have some kind of tally of what the legal costs have
I will share with
been?
you that when we make this effort today, when we litigate and have to take somebody to court, we litigate for legal fees. And in my last case, we were awarded $5,000 to pay for our legal costs. So I try that on every case. We're not always successful, but I would say it's probably 9 out of 10.
but as you remember, Bill, being on zoning, you can have lawyers at all these meetings, especially the high-profile ones that you and I used to from years ago. And blight. and blight. And sometimes we can collect, many times we can't, many times it's the letters and all that. I don't know that there's a specific line item for blight as well as, or just general government. Is it just general?
It would either be general government or zoning that we
Right.
would charge it to.
And as you know, none of the departments have a legal line. We consolidated it all to the general government
It's,
line.
when we started talking about the blight a long time ago, and Bill and I had this
Yeah.
conversation downstairs, it just seems like a slippery slope. I
It
think the
is.
return on investment is there because the property values will go